So today with me, I have Sheila Enriquez. Sheila is the managing partner at Briggs Veselka and a past president of TXCPA Houston. So welcome, Sheila, for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm happy to be here.
So I thought I'd ask some icebreaker questions just to kind of get things started here. I don't know if you're a reader at all or if you watch TV, but I guess just kind of like to know, what are you currently reading or any shows you're currently watching?
So I'm more of a reader. I'm actually a very voracious reader. Although I've shifted to Audible. For some of the people that are actually listening and are watching this video, I highly recommend Audible because it allows me to actually go through books a lot quicker, because I can do it while driving, I can kind of listen in. But the one that I'm reading right now is Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin. So it's about changing habits, and she's actually the happiness guru. So she did a project called the Happiness Project and wrote books about happiness. And so I'm very fascinated about that, about the notion of, happiness itself is not driven by your success, but it's something that if you're happy, you actually become successful. So this new book that she put out is really about changing your habits by understanding yourself. So being aware of your very nature, because all of us probably struggle with building habits. I know I struggle with that, and I have to almost really understand myself. And she also wrote a book called 4 Tendencies. So if you haven't read that book, it's very interesting as well. She talks about our different tendencies as people. And so knowing your tendency, and as it turned out, I'm an obliger. She has obliger, upholder, questioner, and rebel are the four tendencies that she talks about. And as an obliger, I actually am very good at following through on what other people want me to do. But when it comes to my own internal needs, I need to have an accountability partner. So it's really fascinating how then she kind of breaks it down into, when you're changing a habit, you need to have an accountability partner. So I'm probably about 50% in. So I'm really, really enjoying it.
That sounds really neat. I haven't heard of that book, so definitely we'll have to check that out. Well, neat. So it sounds like sort of the self-help genre is right now is kind of where you're focused right now, at least during this pandemic.
Yeah, I actually really like it because a lot of it is more about personal development and the areas that I know I struggle with, especially when it comes to now having to work remote. And part of the challenge for me is the whole exercise and spending quality time with yourself, and that's always hard to find when I'm juggling a lot of things, and managing the firm, still doing a lot of client work as well. So, and then of course a family. I've got 2 boys and a wonderful husband. So it's sort of like, how do I balance all of that? And so kind of looking for ways to do that. I'm also very much interested in fiction, but trying to balance that right now. So because time is short.
Where's one place you'd like to visit that you've never been before?
Oh, it's such a great question. I actually was talking to my sister about this. I'm an avid traveler. My whole family, we actually love going to different places each year. And sometimes we would actually have 2 trips each year because I have family overseas. And so I'm very fortunate to have friends and family that we can visit no matter what part of the world. But one that has really been intriguing to me is Switzerland. So that's probably going to be next on our trip for once we're able to fly and plan something, because there's just something about nature, I think, that Switzerland is known for. And so I've been seeing a lot of pictures, and I was talking to one of my partners whose wife is actually a travel agent. She owns a more of a high-end travel agency, and he was sharing that that's one of their favorite places, and it kind of piqued my interest because he's an avid traveler. He and his wife are avid travelers too.
I like that. Yeah, Switzerland. I visited once to Zurich, and they have fine chocolate. So hopefully you get to go there soon.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to visit it.
Next question, who's your hero and why?
Oh, that's a good one. I would probably say my parents. I know there's two of them, but they've been married over 48 years, and they've been through a lot together. And just the way that they've raised us 6 kids and the way that they've taught us our values, it's I feel like they've accomplished so much, with very little. And just kind of seeing how they lived and how they continue to live, and life of faith, also positivity, and focus on education. I just look at kind of my siblings now are all married. In fact, we just had a nephew was born about a week ago. So the family's growing, and the family is sort of becoming more extended as we live in different places around the world. But the glue really are my parents, and they've been wonderful examples for us. So I would say that they're my heroes for that reason. They really taught us to not limit ourselves, of like reaching for that, just reaching that potential, but always staying humble and always staying grounded. So it's I would say that they're my heroes for that reason, for those reasons.
To raise 6 kids is wow. That's I can't imagine doing that. We've got 2, and 2 feels like a lot. So
I remind my mom that, because I have 2 as well. I have 2 boys, 17 and 10, and I'm fortunate because my husband is very, very active, in helping with everything really in the household. And so I tease my mom because, with 6 kids, and we were sort of close to each other a couple of years apart, it's a lot of fun for us kids, but not fun for the parents when we're fighting or, being rambunctious. But I think they're seeing the benefits of it now, though, when we're older, and seeing now the grandkids, and actually I have they have a great grandniece, a great grandchild now, which is a great niece for me. So it's sort of amazing to see the different generations.
What's the one piece of advice that you'd give your younger self?
Oh, that's a really good one too. I think what the advice that I would give myself that I've learned as I got older is to not get so caught up in what like the criticisms maybe that people might have, or feedback that people would have, because it's easy, right, to get caught up in sort of wanting to please, or wanting to react to a feedback or a comment, especially for me, that's an obliger, right? It's like I want to please people. I want to do well. I want to exceed expectations. But I've come to realize as I got older that you can't really please everybody. So it's very important to just be true to your values, because there's always going to be someone that will disagree. But if you're rooted in your values, and you're understanding yourself and understanding the circumstances, and you're willing to learn and willing to correct yourself, that you don't have to really dwell on it and ruminate and worry about it. You just have to recognize, is that a signal? Is it something I need to do something about? Or is it just noise? Is it something that maybe the intent is not so good, and it's just something that I need to ignore? So I'm still working on that, because I think ultimately we're all human, right? As human beings, we want to connect, and we want to belong, and all those things. But I've come to realize that it's okay, to get the feedback and then objectively look at it and say, is that something I need to do something about, or is it something that I can actually just say, okay, noted, but I'm okay? So that's probably one advice I would give myself if I can go back.
I think applying that to the CPA profession, you want to be there for your client. Sometimes the client may not agree with what you've done, and may not appreciate the work that you've done. So,
well, as an auditor, you're absolutely right. I've had to deliver bad news, right? And being able to say, this is not right, we need to make an adjustment, and I think what I've learned too is, as long as I've delivered the message with clarity and the right way, it's really, there are things you can't control, and one of them is how the other person is going to react. So that's a true lesson, when you think about, you can't control the other person. Your response is what you can control. So
last question. This one kind of has a tax theme to it. If someone gifted you $15,000, what would you do with the money?
That's easy for me because it's probably at this stage of our lives, my husband and I have made a commitment, to pay things forward, because we've been very fortunate. And I think you may know this about me, but I was the beneficiary of a scholarship program, and that's the reason why I was able to come to the United States. And so because of that, I've been able to achieve what I've achieved. So I'm a huge proponent of education and helping out, to be able to give people that are underprivileged, the opportunity to pursue a degree, to pursue education. So I will give this money for sure to a scholarship fund, and so that's something that is near and dear to me, something that my husband and I, are really, really committed to doing going forward. So yeah, so if you give me 15,000, I know exactly where I'm putting it.
Well, I think that's a really good cause and a good way to spend that gift. Can you just tell us about your sort of responsibilities as managing partner of Briggs Veselka? What does a managing partner do?
Oh, sure. I'm happy to share that with you. I'm actually relatively new in the job. I've been the managing partner of Briggs Veselka now for about 2.5 years. So it's been a very eventful 2.5 years, given COVID and everything. But if I were to describe it really in a very short, in a nutshell, it's really being able to set and influence the direction of the firms. It's being a steward of the resources and the legacy and all that was given to me by virtue of transitioning from John Flatowitz, who was the prior managing partner, and Johnny Veselka even before that. So it's setting the vision and the strategy for the firm. It's basically creating an environment where, because we're a professional services firm, that we're the employer of choice. So one of my main responsibilities is really building the next pipeline of not just leaders, but pipeline of CPAs within the firm. And then also being able to be the face in the community, of being the brand ambassador, of talking about our vision and our strategy and our commitment to the community and our clients. So in many ways, it's really setting that long-term strategy while also holding people accountable and holding myself accountable and making sure that we're meeting the results, short-term or both short-term and long-term.
So kind of getting back to that accountability that you mentioned earlier in the book that you're reading.
Yes, for sure. And we're very lucky. I'm very lucky in a way, because whenever I took over from the firm, it's really a very successful firm from the outset. So we're celebrating our 47th year anniversary this year, because we were founded in 1973. And, following in the footsteps of Johnny Veselka and John Flatowitz, I definitely have big shoes to fill. But they really set the stage, for that next phase within the firm of growing and becoming more sustainable, because we grew really rapidly in the past 10 years. And so now my biggest responsibility is to realign the firm and put the right infrastructure in place to be able to allow that growth to happen in a very organic way and in a way that actually is sustainable. I'd like to think that, we're approaching our 50th, that we're going to be 100 years old, right? And it's going to be this firm that will continue long before I'm gone, long before I'm retired. And it would still continue to provide a place for CPAs that are looking for, very rewarding careers that allow them to still build a family and be a steward in their own right of the path that they want to take, depending on their interests. And so I'm very passionate really about, certain things, education I've spoken about earlier. I'm very passionate about the firm and the profession as a whole, hence my involvement with the TXCPA, because I tell you, I found being a CPA by accident. I wasn't going to be a CPA, but once I found it, I really appreciate the opportunities and and just how good of a profession it is. So I'm always going to talk about and try to convince anybody that would listen to, consider becoming a CPA, because it truly is a great profession. And my firm in particular, I'm very proud of because of what we've been able to accomplish from a cultural perspective to provide, our staff and our associates opportunities within the firm.
Sounds like a really good firm. So whatever you're doing in the past few years, keep it up, because it seems to be working. So can you tell me, what does a typical work week look like for you then? And it doesn't necessarily have to do with the managing partner duties, but just in general, what does a typical work week look like?
Yeah, there's no question. It's incredibly busy right now. I think too, for the past 2 years, it's just been one of those periods in my life where the transition happened very quickly in terms of me taking over as managing partner. So I still carry a fairly significant book of business right now, and that's something that I'm having to kind of work through, because I think part of the evolution of the firm is I almost kind of, the way I describe it is, Johnny took us from our infancy to our formative years, and then John took us from our formative years to our teenage years. So then it was an accelerated growth. So I'm now kind of like that person that's going to take that 18-year-old, right, and try to kind of make that person into an adult in the firm, into a grown-up, a mature firm. And so my weeks tend to really focus on making sure that not just the day-to-day, but the longer-term goals are top of mind for me. So I try to start the week with I call it a weekly compass, where before the beginning of each week, and I need to be more consistent with this, but the intent is that in the beginning of each week, I'm sort of putting out my big rocks, the things that I need to do. And whether that's as a partner that's client facing, as a mentor, because I do mentor a lot of our associates as well as our partners, but then also then the strategy, right, and the strategic goals and the tactical aspects to meet the strategic goals. So it's really covering those three aspects of it that take up a lot of my time. And so I'm very lucky because I've got a wonderful team. So I try to one of the things I'm working on is really making sure that I'm able to delegate, and I'm building the team that I can delegate to, because as we grow, it's even more important that I'm spending my time in the highest and best use of my time, instead of doing things that maybe other people can do. So I would say it's between tactical, strategic, and then monitoring, being able to see how we're doing. Because of COVID, it's really changed, in terms of how my weeks have been. Whereas before, it was more of a very intentional, I kind of know what the week it looks like. Lately, it's been more of, I need to just be one step ahead, right? And so there's a sense of urgency in everything that I'm doing now, because things can shift very quickly, and so the term that keeps coming up with me is being agile, so that when things happen, I can react, and then I can get with my team so that we can adjust to it. Because working from home is very, very different than working at the office. I find myself making decisions that are, whereas before as CPAs, we tend to want data, right? And that's typically how I'm wired, is I need information to make a decision. And I'm not saying that I don't need that now, but I think I've learned to adapt to where I don't need a lot of information anymore, where there's that, I don't know if you've read the book Blink, but anyway, it's like in his argument is that you can actually make decisions in the blink of an eye, right? Because there's enough data there, you just don't realize it. So I'm learning to be more agile when it comes to that. So my weeks can actually look very different from week to week, depending on what is the fire that I'm putting out this week, and at some point though, I'd like to think that things will start to kind of go back to a sense of normalcy, whatever that might look like. Maybe not the same as before, but where I can actually plan, and I can actually, have more of a 3-month, or a 6-month plan, as opposed to I'm really giving myself a month, right, and trying to adjust accordingly. Yeah, and I'm going to guess that that's kind of what people are facing right now, regardless of their roles in their organizations. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of uncertainty that we're facing. And so part of addressing uncertainty is being comfortable with it. I think what I've found is I just need to be comfortable that things are going to be uncertain for a while, which means that I have to be willing to pivot when I need to. And it's okay. It's not a judgment, right, on my decision making or my team's decision making. We face it when it comes, and then we should be ready to adjust as needed.
Those watching or listening may not know that you have a Juris Doctorate. So why did you pursue that for JD?
Yeah, interestingly enough, for me, I've always found school to be very enjoyable. I know I'm weird. My husband thinks I'm weird, and so does my 17-year-old for even saying that. But I've always enjoyed school. I like the intellectual challenge, that it comes with. And so when I was living in Rhode Island, I was actually a supervisor manager at a CPA firm there. And I had an opportunity to attend Roger Williams University Law School on a scholarship. And it was one of those opportunities that I just couldn't turn down. And so my husband actually encouraged me to try it, even though it's at the time my son was actually 1. He was a year old, and it was one of those things that was a tough decision because I was concerned about working full time, raising a family. But I'm really glad that my husband encouraged me. Initially, my thought was that I was going to shift to tax because my old firm, I did audits as well as tax, pretty much everything, audit, tax, consulting in the summer. And so that's what prompted me to go to law school initially, and then determined in the process that I absolutely enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed the experience. I continued attending the part-time program in the evenings. And then when we moved to Houston for personal reasons, I ended up transferring to University of Houston Law Center. And that's how I ended up finishing up my degree. Luckily for me, I did find a firm, Briggs Veselka, that allowed me to pursue my degree in the evenings and allowed me to kind of have that flexibility to attend classes in the evenings too. So long story short, it was just one of those goals that I had that the firm supported. I passed the bar exam in February of 2009, and then ended up utilizing the litigation training to start the litigation practice of the firm. So now it's a great complement to what I do and the expert work that I've built up for the firm. So and also the audit and the forensics aspect of it.
So how has the combination of the CPA and JD helped you in your line of work? And I think you probably answered this already, but just if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think greatly so, and I'm very appreciative of the firm, because I do remember when I was about to finish, I was exploring, how do I leverage the legal training, especially because I'm not in tax. I think if I were in tax, it's a more natural fit, right? And I've always believed in sort of leveraging the legal skill sets anyway, because I feel like there's so much complement to what we do as CPAs, whether you're in tax or in audit, because you're applying laws. But where I gravitated was really the litigation support, because at that time we had some practice, but not a real practice. So one-offs, we had a partner at the time that was doing some tax controversy work. So a lot of it were more revolving really around tax. And so somehow I discovered the world of economic damages and forensics, which really is more along the lines of business disputes, commercial disputes that go to court, and then they need an expert to calculate damages and testify, in depositions and in trial. And somehow I found my niche, as an auditor, which I've always kept that. I still do audits even today, but it's such a natural fit. And so how it's helped me is not just in performing the work, but I think it gives me a great deal of confidence, being able to interact with the attorneys at their own level, where they don't have to teach me about rules of evidence and how does this play into the motions practice. And so I'm able to speak to them about the substance of the case, and they can almost they'll treat me right as part of the team, not just in the damages part of it, but also in the strategy. And that's been very, very exciting for me. I love it because I feel like I'm essentially living vicariously through my clients, where although I'm not practicing, although I do some pro bono work as an attorney, but in terms of the business, I'm in the courtroom, I'm testifying, I'm helping, I'm strategizing with them, even though I'm technically not working, as a lawyer in the case. It's been great. And then from a marketing perspective, it's wonderful because I get to network with them in their own turf, right? So, I'm a member of the bar, I go to the Houston Bar Association meetings, I belong to a section, and so it's almost like I've got a captive audience, and I go to these events because very few of my competitors are there, to network with them. So it's definitely helped, and I tell you, it has helped me in running the firm in more ways than one. Because it's if you think about running the firm, it's risk mitigation. That was one thing I didn't mention. I'm responsible for managing the firm's risks. And I think as an attorney, I get to really use my legal training, whether it's reviewing contracts or looking at, risks that we may be facing, or M&A, when we're doing deals, like we closed 6 deals in a year and a half. And all of that comes to fore in terms of the training that I've gotten as an attorney. So yeah, I must say it's been a huge boon. It's been a big help in sort of my line of work.
Yeah, I can imagine having your foot in both doors, or I guess, in both worlds is really, there aren't a lot of JD CPA, so it is a unique combination.
That's true. That's why we have a few in the CPA Society, which I'm very proud of. So shout out to them, Mark Leaks is an example, Carol Worley, to just name a few.
So transitioning to TXCPA Houston, how did you get involved in TXCPA Houston?
Great segue, actually, in mentioning Mark Lee and Susan Sample. So my initial involvement with the TXCPA was because of Johnny Veselka, who's our founding partner. So Johnny was very, very involved in the profession, both at the local and state level. And so he was an active member of the Public Relations Committee. And so when he retired in 2009 timeframe, actually it was even earlier than that, I think about 2008, he actually asked if I could replace him on the committee because he was retiring. And so it was a great honor for me. I didn't know much about the society because I was a transplant. We moved to Houston in 2006. So I didn't know much about the Houston CPA Society or the TXCPA for that matter. But I was a member because our firm pays for 100% of the CPAs in the firm. But it doesn't mean that we're active, And so that was my starting sort of my opening really for getting involved. So I became a member of the committee and very quickly found myself playing a role because due to unforeseen events, the vice chair had to actually step down because she needed to take a new role with a bank, and it didn't allow for her to have the flexibility that she had before. And out of the blue, she asked me to actually replace her as vice chair. And I'll never forget because Stephen King, I don't know if you know Steve King, he was the chair of the PR committee at the time. And I think her name was Sherry Evans. She was the one that was the vice chair at the time. And I kind of got to know her because I volunteered to do one project or something that they were doing. And I think they saw how interested I was. And then she ended up nominating me, and then before you knew it, I was the chair the next year. But I think the two people that were really responsible, and Mark Lee in particular, Mark Lee and Susan Sample were the ones that really got me engaged, right? So where I kind of saw, this is really interesting to me, and there's so much I can do. In many ways, in terms of giving back to the profession and getting involved and also improving my own leadership abilities as well. Because at the time, Mark Lee was the incoming president-elect. And so Susan and I met at a mixer at Fulbright because she was an attorney there. And she got me to have lunch with Mark, and they got me involved with the scholarship gala that year because they were co-chairing it. The next year was Mark Lee's president year, and he wanted to have Johnny Veselka as the honoree for the scholarship extravaganza. So I ended up co-chairing that gala with Susan Sample. And the rest is history. Because through my involvement in the public relations committee and the gala, I got nominated to be on the board, and then got nominated to be on the state board, and then the executive committee. And it kind of just, happened from that point on. And I just met so many incredible people. I still I still am very close to so many of them right now. And it's been a great experience just being involved with the CPA Society, whether that's at the local or the state level. It's been a great experience.
That's great. It sounds like you just have to get pulled in, and it takes one person to say, "Hey, come to this meeting. Let's check it out together." And then before you know it, you're the vice chair of the committee, and then you're on other committees, and it just grows from there. So that's a great story. So as I mentioned earlier, you were the past president of the CPA Society. So what was something that you weren't expecting that when you took the role of president that you hadn't anticipated? What was one thing after being in that role that you were like, oh, I didn't think this was going to happen, and this is, turned out this is something I needed to take care of or deal with while I was president?
Yeah, I think for me, it was more of the realization that there is so much parallel to the things that were happening at the society at the time and my firm. So really my stint as president, and that would include being on the executive committee and president-elect and president and an immediate past president, the timing couldn't have been more perfect because I finished my tenure as president and then I took over as managing partner of Briggs Veselka. But in many ways, there was a lot of commonality to the issues that we were facing. So one of the things I had to deal with in taking over as president was change management, because we were actually installing a new executive director, and it was her second year, by the time that I took over. So Deborah Seefeld, my predecessor, who actually is part of Briggs Veselka now, she's a partner at my firm now, but at the time, she had her own firm. She was the president before me, and I'll never forget, her philosophy was ensuring continuity. So it's not about her year, but it's about what are the longer term goals that we have, because having a year tenured, you can't really do much, right, in a year. But if you knew that the goals are really built on longer term strategic goals of the organization, then even though you have 1 year tenures, we're consistent, right? The president-elect, we're consistent in trying to move the needle to achieve those strategies. But change management was a big thing. When you have I think Nancy Rutledge was 36 years as executive director before Jennifer Poff took over, so there was a lot of realignment that needed to happen. Our infrastructure was way behind, not a judgment on the prior executive director. It was just the reality of it. Technology wasn't up to date. There was some, there were some siloed type of activities where we weren't really coordinating with the state. And so what I was able to help accomplish that year was to update our IT, our website, and really through the collaboration with the state, with the TXCPA. So I'm really, really proud of that, because we were one of the first chapters to build a partnership. Because Steve, Jody Ann Ray was the executive director. She was relatively new as well. Stephen Parker was the president. We had many, many conversations about how can we leverage each other, because it's the same membership base. So it really taught me to manage change, and how do I communicate? How do I get the buy-in? How do I start with why? Why do we need to do these things? and why do we need to change, and why do we need to build a pipeline, why do we need to create a program so that our younger generations would be interested in joining. How do we remain relevant? Because it was a question of relevance. Why do we need to join? If I'm a member, what's my value proposition? All of those things happened that year, surveys, and it was definitely a team approach. I remember Harvey happened the year of my presidency as well, and I remember having the meetings and being at the office with the state because we were putting out they were putting out assistance, because we were in Houston, so they needed to take over and help us communicate, and in Dallas, and then also the benevolent fund for the AICPA and helping people that were harmed, and people weren't even, CPA members weren't even aware they were entitled to it. Those to me were not necessarily surprising, but things that came up that I'll never forget. It was a very, very eventful year, and it just sort of prepared me really for the role. I know it kind of sounds probably odd because as an association, I wasn't spending a lot of time necessarily, but we were just in the same stage of change management, trying to get to the next level, and strategic visioning, and saying, let's not just talk about it year at a time, but let's talk about it, and look at it from a longer term perspective. So it definitely prepared me. And then I took over my the managing partner role in July of that same year that I finished in May. So I kind of had that 1 month break, and then so it was really just couldn't have been more perfect from a timing perspective.
So it helped to groom you for the managing partner role, then, it sounds like, in some sense. That's great.
Absolutely.
So you touched on this previously, but so what is the value proposition of TXCPA to Houston, TXCPA Houston to you, or put another way, what do you think the value proposition is to a CPA professional or aspiring CPA? Why should they be a part of TXCPA Houston?
Good question, and it's certainly something that I know the society is still trying to really do a better job of articulating, because I think for those of us that are highly engaged and really involved in the society, it's very clear to us, right, what those value propositions are. And it depends on who you are as a person and what level you are in your career and what you're looking for, but I would name a few. So for me, it's networking is a huge one. It's finding like-minded individuals, and not like-minded in the sense that they keep agreeing with me, but more of common goals and common, similarly situated, facing the same challenges, and being sounding boards, right, to each other, and helping encourage each other. And so I found that, with the relationships that I've built, I still talk to so many of my colleagues at the society where I can pick their brain and I can say, this is happening. And because there's so much alignment with the things that are happening, at the end of the day, we're talking about the same profession, right? Whether I'm looking at it from the society's perspective and its members, or I'm looking at it from my firm's perspective and my partners and our staff, or even if I look at it overall in the, in the profession sense. So I think the networking aspect is huge. I think protecting our license is just a given, right? I mean, I mentioned earlier, I'm very much a proponent for students to consider being a CPA. I believe in it. It's a trusted role, and it really brings with it a lot of commitment as well, right, and responsibility. It's a great profession, but with it comes a great deal of responsibility to the public, and to your constituency. And then I think education. If you think about CPE and being able to get whatever we need that's cost effective in terms of our continuing education, and then the other piece of that is the leadership training that we get through the whether it's Accelerate program or the Young Professionals conferences, or some of the other CPEs that we're putting out that's really more on the soft skills type of training. And then I wouldn't discount, and I would actually emphasize opportunities for leadership roles. So if you're someone, for instance, that's just starting your career, there's so many committees that you can get involved with that you can sort of flex your muscle, maybe learn from those that are veterans. I was so fortunate to have had people like Mark Lee and Susan Sample and all of these other people that took an interest in me and said, she's really somebody that we would like to be involved, and they helped me navigate through that. So I've really made an effort to do that myself, and I'm very proud to let you know that my firm is very, very active in this society, because now we've got several people, Michelle Mullen, Adam Dimmick, Scott Robertson, Rubik Irizaryan, people that have found their own passion within a different committee and have sort of decided that, I also want to get involved. So those were just a few of the things that I personally find very valuable. And I can say with complete certainty that my involvement with the society has helped propel my career in my firm and have given me the confidence, to take on things that I probably would not have even considered before, because it's new, right? It's something different. It's even just trying to get members that's very different in terms of their when you talk about value proposition, what they're looking for. If you look at some of our more experienced practitioners, they may actually have a different lens from which they're looking at what value the membership brings them. If you look at younger generations, they may have a different perspective. Maybe they prefer the online, maybe they prefer the, what we're doing right now, whereas you may have other people that would prefer to have the face-to-face. So then as a society, it's really on us to figure out how can we meet those demands and those needs where it makes sense, right? Given the limited resources. So that's always going to be a challenge, I think, because there are different needs that members are going to ask for. So somehow if we can find a way to package it to where there's a way to customize it, which I know that the state is looking at, that could actually serve us well in increasing our membership and providing more clarity on the value proposition.
I think that's great. You're spot on. You just kind of have to find your tribe within CPA society, and there are so many opportunities. So anybody who's listening or watching, please come visit. We have open houses, an open house at least once a year, if not twice a year. I know it's a little bit different with these times, but it's a great way to introduce yourself and get acquainted with the society. So some fantastic points there. Sheila, any parting thoughts as we close out the interview?
I think I just want to just piggyback on what you mentioned, right? If for any of you watching this video or listening in, I highly encourage you to reach out, because what you'll find is that this is a friendly group. It doesn't matter, if you meet people that are really experienced. In many ways, they can open doors for you. If you're somebody that's starting, if you're even a student, we have a great student auxiliary group that puts on panels, and I actually am a fairly active panelist. I talk about my experience as an auditor. There are times when I talk about my experience as a forensic expert. They put out these panel discussions to allow you to have a better sense of what does life in public accounting look like, right? Or what does life in business and industry looks like. But I really, for those that are listening, if you're already on your path to becoming a CPA, don't give up. I highly encourage you to continue. It's going to be worth it. My own story actually shows that how important that CPA license is. And it took one person who took an interest in me, my mentor, Wayne Shafari, who said, you should get your CPA because that's really going to keep you, open doors for you. And it's something that you can keep forever. And so I encourage anybody that's listening that maybe is having a hard time or thinking about how am I going to do this? If I can do it, you can do it. And I think it's just a matter of discipline and desire, but it will pay off. And for those that are not even considering it, if you're a high schooler and you happen to be thinking, or you're a college, maybe a sophomore looking to see what degree you want to pursue, I encourage you to look at becoming a CPA. We're not as boring as people say we are. It's actually really, really interesting, and I think in many ways you're gonna see that there are a lot of options, that involve technology and auditing and consulting and tax, and so you can pick your whatever interest that maybe is more aligned with your personality or your own desires, and really the sky's the limit. So I just highly encourage your listeners and viewers to make sure they get that CPA under their belt. It's going to be worth it.
Well, you have me sold. So I think anybody listening or watching will be as well. So thank you so much, Sheila Enriquez, for your time. I really appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you in person at some point. And thank you so much again for being part of this podcast.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And it's been fun. So stay safe and healthy, Ryan. Thanks again.
You too. Take care.